What's up, everyone? We're back. Welcome to Doctorly Unhinged.
I'm Dr. Maxfield.
I'm Dr. Shah, and we dive in to the deep world of skincare, beauty, dermatology on this podcast, and just random musings that we talk about throughout. So if you're new here, welcome. If you've been a long time subscriber, welcome back. Today, we have a bunch of things we'll go over. Quick life update from Dr. Maxfield and I. Then we'll be going over our product of the day. What have we been loving? And then we're going to go into this new report that only 1 in 4 sunscreens on the market are safe and effective. Is your sunscreen going to kill you? The role of acne in general self-image, self-esteem, coming from actor Chris Pine, some marketing efforts by The Ordinary, and the fall of Neutrogena. Let's get into it.
Wow, this is a stacked episode. I thought we were doing half of these.
Oh, we're doing all of them? We're not doing all of them?
I don't know. We'll see what we get to in this episode. They're all great topics, though. So life update from me has been relatively quiet. Thankfully, I'm back in the grind, which I love, back to working. And that's probably it. Working on some of our other projects we have rolling out very soon. Some projects I have. And I'm super excited about that.
You all are going to love this next project Dr. Maxfield and everyone has been working on. So I can't wait to chat about that soon.
Yeah. And how about you? You have recently returned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just in clinic all week, seeing patients. And went to my lab, a new lab actually we're exploring on Friday. And they have some really interesting technologies. I might start to maybe potentially incorporate some sunscreens into the line. So that was all day Friday. So
the ultimate active sunscreen from Dr. Shah.
That is absolutely not going to happen. There's going to be no active component. It's going to be invisible. So cosmetic elegance is the goal of this upcoming sunscreen. It's going to be a long time before we launch anything like that. No, we had body restock for the brand. Then I think maybe by the time people are listening to this, lip will be restocked, which has been, and lip will even be better than last time. Same ingredients, even better actual production of it. So this batch is the best batch we've created, and I think it will be back in stock by the time you're listening to this. So this product's been out of stock for like over a month now.
Amazing, crazy. All right, perfect. So product of the day. I am surprised by my product. I'm kind of excited to talk about it. I did a YouTube live just an hour or two ago, and I also brought it up there. But also shout out to Dr. Shah's pore product. You are fortunate. I am fortunate. I have like this nice window where I have no other obligations for skincare. So I'm 3 weeks in every day with pore remedy for pores. No other active ingredients, obviously other steps. And I love it. It's actually strong, but I think it's made it a meaningful difference on my skin. I'm on this like rosacea journey where I've had these red bumps on my face for 6 months now. And I've actually noticed a meaningful improvement in the quality of my texture and skin. I had some irritation to begin with, which was pretty pronounced. But again, I'm like going hard, applying to damp skin on purpose, deliberately disrupting my skin. So my product though, that has been helpful is this Glossier. How do you say this brand? Do you know?
Glossier.
So it's a silent R. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Or suspect. So Glossier, I don't know if you've tried this. I was going to bring this up to you as
what
like
is
just
it?
A weird product. It says their After Balm.
Ooh. So what is it after?
Oh, it's after you paint your house or punch a hole in the wall or something. But the first time I used this, I was going to show this to you. It's like plaster. I don't know if you've ever spackled a wall. You probably haven't.
Yeah.
I probably haven't. You have?
Why would you make the assumption that I've never plastered a wall? I have certainly plastered a wall, many a wall. Okay. You're talking about spackle, and spackle. I even use the pink one sometimes, sand it down, repaint. I've painted walls. I've replaced toilets. I used to mow the lawn. I used to lift heavy things. So the assumption that I would not have ever spackled is insulting.
Okay. So this indoor cat over here used to be like an outdoor bulldozer cat or something.
By necessity. And now I'm soft. I have very soft hands now.
So this moisturizer, look at this thing. It is so sticky and grippy. It's not going anywhere, no matter what you do. Anyway, so
the moisturizer, what is this thing?
a balm, like balm for irritated skin. I don't know.
Ooh, okay.
But anyway, so the first time I tried it, I was like, this stuff is ridiculous. It feels like you're putting plaster on your skin. And I don't have a clue as to why I tried it again. But when my skin was torn up and irritated, it's like everything else irritated it. Even the most gentle facial moisturizers irritated it. This did not. And even just a few days into using it, my skin was feeling great. And now I'm like 5 days out and obviously using like a retinoid a couple weeks in consistently. New products, you might have some irritation and it goes away on its own. So you should continue using it.
Shiny.
Yeah, that'll maybe go away. But super gentle. It grips like crazy. Super protecting. Now, this is going to be in my regular rotation when I get those irritation reactions after every YouTube video we shoot. So I'm loving this product.
Let me look at this ingredient. So babasu oil, linoleic acid, microalgae, which I like these green microalgae. Algae have really interesting properties because of the conditions in which they need to survive in. So seem to be really beneficial on the skin. Glycerin, different seed butters in here. And it is sort of interesting. Yeah, I don't see anything why this wouldn't be a good product. And if it's working for you, it's working for you.
Yeah, but it grips like nothing I have ever tried. It's just unique. Love it or hate it. It's unique.
Oof. Okay, good. Let me give you my product of the day. I have been trying a lot of different sunscreens. So if you have a sunscreen you want me to try, let me know and I will try it. I've really started to fall in love with sunscreens again. And this product I am looking at right now is the Naturium Dew Glow Moisturizer. I think this one is around $20. It also has 3-O-ethyl ascorbic acid and niacinamide in it. So
nice.
Has some additional benefits to it. Now, it is a pure chemical sunscreen, which I don't mind at all. But what's sort of interesting about this sunscreen I want to show you, and I'm going to apply it live. We're doing it live. Do you know this clip?
No.
From Bill
I have
O'Reilly?
no idea what that's from.
You have to watch this clip. I'll send it to you afterwards. It's really funny. It's basically like Bill O'Reilly, like just like going off and like they can't like get it right. So he's just like, we're doing it live. All right. So anyway, this is called the Dew Glow. And the reason why I wanted to apply it live was to show you all how dewy. Now, if you are somebody who likes that matte look, you will hate this sunscreen. But if you're somebody like me who wants that dew, it lasts all like pretty much all day while you wear it, the dewy look. So it's not like something that is just going to like be here for now, but by the end of this podcast, I will still have this on that side of the face. So really is like a nice and dewy look for people who want that look.
Nice. Yeah, I love that addition of 3-O-ethyl ascorbic acid. It's a solid vitamin C. Hopefully, by the time this airs, you can reference back to our YouTube vitamin C video, which I teased out about 4 weeks ago on my Instagram. Like, look what's coming soon. Didn't come soon. Anyway, so
we have a 40-minute video on vitamin C coming. So we really apologize for the thoroughness of this video, but it's been long overdue. And look out for that. When you see the 40-minute video, just hang with us for a bit. But let's hop into some of these topics. So the first one coming up is only 1 in 4 sunscreens on the market are safe and effective, according to new studies. So this is coming out of Script News, where they said out of 1,700 products tested, which included recreational sunscreens and daily use SPF products, nearly 300 contain harmful chemicals. And I don't know why they say that only 1 in 4 sunscreens on the market are safe and effective. Sort of like an odd way to frame this, but the usual suspect here is the Environmental Working Group. So this study is coming out of EWG. So what are our thoughts on this report?
Well, so you brought up an interesting thing is what did they lump together? Like what were some of the common offenders in these sunscreens? Because there's some common ground here. Oxybenzone, we have said this many times, and I have been very passionate about this ingredient. I can't believe it exists in the skincare world at all anymore, universally. Like I don't care where you fall. If you're super cautious with your skincare, if you can't stand a chemical, or if you're fairly comfortable with the idea of chemicals in your skincare, no one feels like this should be in your skincare. Anyway, so that's one. Octinoxate, I'll provide some nuance around this sunscreen ingredient soon. And then additionally, almost 30% list fragrance on the label as an undisclosed mystery ingredient. Now, notably, and there will probably be a video up on my Instagram about this in the deodorant world by the time this airs, this doesn't say synthetic fragrance. It doesn't say natural fragrance. And I don't think there should be the distinction, because both are a proprietary blend of common allergens or potential allergens. But when Dr. Shah showed me this list, I was like, it's kind of like a hodgepodge of list. Like, are your dangerous chemicals your oxybenzone, octinoxate, and fragrance? Like, it doesn't lump well together for me. It doesn't group well together for me.
Yeah. So the problem with this, right, and the problem with EWG, the problem with the Yucca app, the problem with Clean by Sephora, the problem with all of these different things, right, is who decides, right? Like, who decides what is safe and what is effective, right? Because it's not a governmental organization, which I'm not saying the government's any better at doing this than anyone else. It's not EU standards. It's not UK standards. It's not Australia standards. It's not Durham standards, right? It's just like people who have decided what they want to put and what they don't want to put. So there's no standardization of what it means to be safe and effective per this study, other than like what they've decided they don't want in their sunscreens, which they say oxybenzone, octinoxate, fragrance. I'm sure there's a list of other ingredients. I think basically what they're trying to say, Environmental Working Group, is that unless it's a mineral sunscreen, right, which
non-nano zinc specifically,
non-nano zinc, the rest are not safe, not effective, and should not be used. And therefore, they come out with this really kind of misleading statistic that only 1 in 4 sunscreens on the market are safe. So the problem is that, like, who made them the authority? Just like who made us the authority, right? Like, this is just essentially an opinion, right? Like, but I wouldn't go out and say, Dr. Lee says, only these many products on the market work, or these many products are effective, because it really is just subjective. And like, whether you trust our opinions or not, that's going to be up to you as the consumer of information and the arbiter of what is correct and not correct. So my issue with this headline is that it's completely subjective to the authors of that EWG group. We still think octinoxate probably okay. We don't like oxybenzone. Fragrance, I don't like fragrance. Dr. Maxfield doesn't mind fragrance. I think that zinc and titanium dioxide, great. Sunscreen filters, but I also have no issue with avobenzone, octocrylene, or any of these other ingredients. And so, if you put this same 1,700 sunscreens in my hand, I would determine a different number of sunscreens, which I consider to be safe and effective, right? So I wouldn't get scared by this. I think everyone has different standards for what they want. And maybe you're somebody who wants to follow the EWG guidelines of what they consider to be safe and effective. That's fine. I think that personally, they do a ton of fear mongering. And also, part of this report, they talk about how you should look for products that are EWG verified, right? The products that get the stamp of approval from the EWG, which I believe you have to pay for. And so they obviously have their own motivations in which they determine something is to be safe and effective. And if consumers believe that they trust this, then they're going to go with this. But personally, it's not something that and if you're a consumer of our information and have followed us for a long time, we oftentimes recommend things that would not be recommended by the EWG and vice versa. So I don't consider it to be a very reliable source, but they have their criteria, we have our criteria, and everyone's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think a problem with this too, like when you told me this headline, when you brought this to my attention, my first thought was, okay, this is going to be an effectiveness problem again. And I think that has more to do with the headline. Again, you kind of mentioned fear mongering, and I'm rereading the numbers here, and even in the subtitle, out of 1,700 products, nearly 300 contain harmful chemicals. Only 1 in 4 is safe. That's not math. And
yeah, so where did they come up with that? That's what I don't get. Say. Like, the math is not math.
So again, I think they're overstating their case. I think they're just eroding the trust in sunscreen in general. And, it's unfortunately or fortunately, it's like the core foundational step in healthy skin, no matter how you slice it. Either you stay inside or you protect your skin outside. There is no third option for healthy skin in general. So I dislike the direction of this. I don't know. I just really feel like with all of the like, for example, I've made a post on one of my socials, right, about sunscreen safety and carcinogens. And people were like, oh, but it has benzene. It's can't, like, they were proposing, like, don't you understand sunscreen causes cancer? Sunscreen creates benzene. And it's stuck. Like, you can't deny that sunscreen is irreversibly linked to benzene now, and it's not warranted. Like, benzene has been found in multiple cosmeceutical products, dry shampoos, a lot of other cosmeceuticals. And then I saw another report today about benzene and environmental exposure, but unrelated to sunscreen. But somehow sunscreen and benzene are now linked for the rest of their existence, it seems. And this is the type of article that I think is detrimental to people overall who are really trying to become educated and take care of their skin.
100%, right. It just creates distrust. Like there are so many people who now think that sunscreen causes cancer, and it's all some great, conspiracy theory to sell you sunscreen. Maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe I'm genuinely wrong about this, right? We'll find out one day. I personally use sunscreen. I recommend it to all my family and friends. I think it works incredibly well. I believe in sunscreen wholeheartedly. And you're going to hear conflicting opinions across the board. What's good and bad for you? Is broccoli going to kill you? Are apples going to kill you? Oh, these cold pressed juices have tons of sugar. There's always going to be conflicting opinions on anything health related, anything beauty related. You have to find the sources of information that you want to trust. And you are, like I said, you have control over your own body. If you tell me I only want to use zinc or titanium sunscreens because of my concerns of absorption into the skin, I would say that is an incredibly reasonable thing to do. I would not fight you on that in any way.
I agree.
I would just tell you personally, this is what I do as somebody who's read hundreds of studies. I don't have an issue with certain chemical sunscreen filters, and I continue to use them and recommend them for my family. So, and I even mentioned before, if a family member was pregnant, I would tell them to avoid chemical sunscreen filters for now, because the absorption risk is unknown, especially to like a developing baby. And so therefore, that would be one group of people, I would say, probably a good idea based on like the limited data that we have, though I think the risk is incredibly low. Like if you're pregnant and you're using chemical sunscreens, I don't think that you're doing something harmful. But I think just because of the unknown risk, I would say, yeah, sure. Like, family member, you're pregnant, switch to zinc or titanium sunscreens for now. I think that's very reasonable if you like to err on the side of caution. But then I would also say, like, that's my own judgment, right? Like, I would be happy if another expert turned around and said, I think Dr. Shah is absolutely ridiculous for making this recommendation during pregnancy. I think that all sunscreens, including oxybenzone, should be used during pregnancy. And I would say, well, that's my opinion. That's your opinion. And the people get to decide based on who they want to believe is the correct answer. Because I don't think there are certain areas within medicine, skincare, dermatology that are gray areas, and they are judgment calls, and you have to pick like what you want to go with. And I personally still use chemical sunscreens because I think, based on the body of data that I've interpreted, that they are safe and effective.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's this idea of common ground too, where you have to take a hard stance on even something like this. Like in the room, if I go see a patient and they are like, and this happens all the time. They come to see a doctor, they come to see a dermatologist, they come to see me, and they're like, hey, I don't want to use any chemicals. Look, they have pre-made that decision before they entered the room, before I entered the room. And even if I took an hour with that person, I'm not going to convince them at the end of that day, you have to use chemicals. Yeah. I feel like dermatologists and doctors, especially in Western medicine, need to be educated in alternative options so they can propose a data-driven alternative treatment regimen. Now, it might not be as robust, and I think we can verbalize that to them in the room. But for sunscreens, it's not actually in that conversation. Like, I come in, you want to use sunscreen? I don't want any chemicals. All right, perfect. Here are my list of options. Here are the caveats. It might not blend. Like, that's the most realistic one.
Yep.
If that's acceptable to you, then here are some good ones. And we have to be able to engage in that common ground. We both agree you want to wear sunscreen.
Yeah.
And we disagree on the chemical side of it, but we can come to like a positive endpoint with that. Great. We've agreed on these sunscreens. There's a compromise. Perfect.
I think this is the value in having these conversations with people in real life, in the office, and seeing patients every day, because you understand the dialogue and what it goes like in a patient, especially when you're trying to build trust in a very short period of time with somebody, is you really a lot of times need to meet people where they are. The conversation with me with a lot of people is like, oh, I only want to use mineral sunscreens. I say, good. I personally have no issue with chemical sunscreens. I have tons of chemical sunscreens that I love. I personally think they're safe. Now, you could trust me, you cannot trust me, but I'm not going to try to convince you in this appointment, because I think that erodes trust when you try to like be like, no, I'm right, you're wrong. Like, because then some report will come out, right? Right. Like where you're like, you forced this thing on them. And then the benzene report comes out on the bunch of sunscreens that you recommended. And then it's like the trust is eroded. You didn't even like consider their opinion when they walk in. So I say like, here, I do love chemical sunscreens. There's a few that I love. But here are my favorite mineral sunscreens that blend really well that I've tried. And, Biossance is amongst them. And this is, MD's, whatever, so I just go and I say, hey, here are the ones that I love, that are pure mineral sunscreens that you can try out. And then they go, okay, fine, that's the one I want to use. And I choose, and we have this dialogue. We give this autonomy to patients to make decisions. And it's easy as a content creator to yell into a vacuum your opinion, and be like, hey, kind of like really try to force it down people. But the reality is that people are autonomous and they make their own decisions, and people need to feel like they're making their own decisions. You can't just be like paternalistic in the way of like just giving your ideas to people and making and forcing them to adopt them. And I think when you see patients every day, you realize you don't make a lot of headway just trying to force people to adopt your beliefs.
Yeah, I agree. They'll stop talking to you and they'll listen, because a lot of people are very respectful.
Yeah.
But they're not gonna follow through. Like, you just know that when you see them.
Yep. And that's why sometimes I give people a lot of natural hair options. I'll be like pumpkin seed oil and this and that, because I know that they're not going to use Rogaine, right? And so I want to present them with alternatives, right? I've had the discussion and they're like immediately turned off by it, right? They're like, I'm just not going to do it. So you're like, okay, well, here are some other options that maybe are less effective, but worth trying if you're not going to try the other things.
Yeah.
All right. So I think all in all, to summarize this article, I disagree with this statistics. I disagree with the methodology of EWG in coming up with what they consider to be safe and effective. And I think that the only ingredient we're still recommending to avoid is oxybenzone. And personally, I don't like fragrance. So I think it would be reasonable to not use fragrance.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So next up is Chris Pine addressing his emotionally incapacitating acne and how that acne kept him from landing his role in the OC. Do you remember the show, The OC?
Dude, I was the biggest OC fan.
I knew you were. I knew you must have been. That's why this headline ended up here in our list, didn't it? You were like, OC, that's my show.
It is my show. Yeah.
Who did you like? Who was who did you like? Which character?
Oh, it's been so long. Seth? Is that it? Yeah, Seth, I think.
Seth was okay. So you were the Seth fan, not like who's the other guy?
It's been so long.
Ryan.
Nice. Good memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Seth. But yeah, I watched that show so many times through until they killed off Marissa, or she like made them kill her off. Anyway, love that show. I've been dying. See, my life goal has been to live at the beach, right? So in my mind, I was vicariously living through them in high school. That's how the OC was for me. So this though, Chris Pine, you might recognize him from movies that Dr. Shah could tell you all about. All I can think of is Star Trek. And
he was in Star Trek. Let's see. I'm trying to think of like which big movies.
Oh, Wonder Woman. Right?
Wonder Woman, obviously. Yeah. Horrible Bosses 2. Jack Ryan. He was in Jack Ryan, the show on Amazon. This Means War. That's like one of my favorite.
I don't know what these are.
Like movies that like a romantic, like it's like a romantic comedy. It's a really good movie. Yeah. Okay. So we get the point. Yeah, he's an actor, and he wants to talk a little bit about how acne affected his life. And I have some really kind of anecdotes from this because I think they're really, really important about the way that skin affects your mental health and what I've learned from my patients along the way.
Yeah. And some similarly, like I think that's the key word. You've learned from your patients along the way, and you've maybe been personal stories. But I'm going to let this come out of his mouth here because I think it is important to hear it from the person who it's effective. So basically he says that because of his acne and because in the show, quote, like they wanted beautiful people doing beautiful things, he felt like his acne was the reason he didn't land the part. He says, quote, I don't want to say I'm grateful for not having landed the part of Ryan, who we just referenced before. I'm all right, but it is a little PSD. It's no fun having bad skin. It was one of the most traumatic points of my life, but it is my story, man. End quote. And so he continues on and it says, let's see. I feel like acne is regarded as just this thing like, oh, it's just like and this, the likes even are his quotes. It's not me saying like, even though I say that, what you go through as a teenager, and it can be, but it is kind of just like you get a pimple on your forehead. It can also be tremendously debilitating and really seriously emotionally incapacitating, which was for me. So for anyone out there who is experiencing that, I get you, I hear you, I've been there, I know it. I know how depressing it can be and the kind of depths of sorrow it can drag you to, but there is a brighter day. So that, I mean, he did a really good job, I think, verbalizing the significance for him, not only in his personal life, the longitudinal scope and how it impacted his career, although obviously it worked out for him in the end, but also just how it mentally affects you. And a lot of people, even though acne is very common, I think do struggle with this alone. And it's kind of this mixed bag as we try to normalize acne. We also, I don't know, we have almost unnormalized treating acne. And then around social media too, I'm not saying everyone has to be on Accutane. I'm not saying anyone has to be on oral antibiotics. I'm not saying anyone has to do anything about it if it doesn't bother them. However, I have seen so many people turned away from the treatment of their acne when it could be treated and when it's important to them and when it really bothers them, purely because of social media, fear mongering, and things like that. And then we've also seen the other side, like the incredible impact it's had on patients when their acne is cured or treated successfully. And I always say, like, this, one of the most meaningful things is progressively seeing these young individuals come back month after month after month, and their eye contact improves. Their smile is just like marvelously bigger. And they're like looking at you in the eyes all of a sudden when they're talking to you, and they're not looking down. They're not having their hair worn over their face. And it's these small things that speak to the significance of acne. And till 6 months later, it's like a new person. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things, getting to see those small changes, even in this microcosm of the office visit, to what that must extrapolate to over the course of their lives.
100%. And, you know, I think one of the things that, you know, we'd wish for the world is that people wouldn't care about these things, right? Like, oh, why do you care, right? But the truth is, when you're young and you're vulnerable and you're looking at the kids around you, and kids aren't always nice to other kids, and you don't always feel confident enough to go to school, these things make a big difference. I remember I would break out and I would not want to go to school the next day, or I would come up with an excuse about why I didn't want to go, or why I didn't want to take the school photos when I was having a bad acne breakout, right? We're not going to change the world. We're not going to change the way that people think about themselves, right? We hope for a world where people are more confident. I remember, and I think even as time has gone on, I've become more confident in myself, right? But I wasn't always like that, right? So now people will say to me like, "Oh, like Dr. Shah, did you get filler or whatever?" And I'm like, "Nah, I gained weight." You know, I've never gotten filler, right? Like, you know this, Dr. Maxfield. But there was a period where I had gained a lot of weight. I was traveling a ton. I was eating all the airport foods. Took comfort in a nice meal as a way to de-stress. I've lost a little bit of weight since then. But when I was like kind of peak weight, people were kind of making comments. Small, not many people. People were super kind to me, to be fair. Like people were like, "Are you okay?" So I will say like our community is like really positive. So I really didn't face like some of the negativity that a lot of people would face. They would just say like, "Oh, did you get a little bit of filler?" And I'm like, "Nah, just kind of like my weight goes directly to my cheeks, right?" So, so had I been younger and I had been getting those comments, right, you know, and I hadn't been through so much in life and I hadn't built up like confidence, then those things probably would affect me. Like, but for me, like they actually don't, because I feel like I've built self-confidence. But if I was a teenager and I had a social media following and people were commenting on my weight and my appearance, then it would probably affect me like quite a bit. And so you have to give people the time to build that confidence in things other than their appearances. And it's not unreasonable that these things truly, truly affect you as a teenager. And like you said, we see it in our patients when their acne gets better, how their personality changes because of the way they view themselves and how they want to interact with the world around them as a result of that. When I was in New York this past year for Fashion Week, there's always like tons of events around Fashion Week and runways, and there's models kind of like jumping in and out of Ubers and like doing all these different things. That's what Fashion Week is like in New York, especially in certain areas of the city. And I was walking on my way to like shoot a podcast, and this model stopped me, male model, and he's like, "Oh my God, Dr. Shah. I just wanted to tell you that I started using tretinoin because of your videos, and it helped clear up my skin, and it gave me the confidence to go to my first audition as a model. I locked in my first gig as a model, and now I'm walking fashion shows during Fashion Week. I think these things make a big difference. Like, this is the meaning of why, this is the reason why I continue to create content. This is the reason I feel like what we're doing makes a difference, because it does have a meaningful impact on people's lives when it improves their confidence to do the things they want to do in life. So, and I think with time you build up confidence that are outside of your appearance. But I think that takes time, and I think it's very reasonable for people to care about these things. And so I'm kind of glad that he shared it. I think acne is something that bothers a lot of people, and a lot of people feel like it's not something they should focus on or care about, but it is, and it's something that bothers you. And if it's something that bothers you, I think it's reasonable to address it, and that's why we do, I think, what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree.
Okay. All right. So next topic here. So good on Chris Pine for sharing that story. I think it will help a lot of people. This one will be really brief, but The Ordinary, right? The brand The Ordinary always has really interesting ad campaigns, and they've always done like almost anti-marketing in many ways. So this is about the minimalist approach of The Ordinary's marketing, essentially. And they've done a few really interesting things over the years. There was a period, right, where they were saying like everything is a chemical, right? We have tons of chemicals in our products, right? Because everyone was like anti-chemical, and they're like, no, we're all chemicals, right? And then everyone was anti-sulfate, and then they came out with their like sulfate shampoos, right? So they like do this sort of like anti-marketing. It's almost like a stubbornness against like what the traditional thing is. But the truth is, it's a form of marketing, right? Like, it's kind of like how the anti-joke is a form of a joke. And I think that The Ordinary has gotten very good at anti-marketing and spending a lot of money to anti-market, right? So for example, they have this, this is coming out of Muse by Clio, which I don't know what this is, but this article came across. I just thought it was really interesting about The Ordinary's approach to marketing. So they have this giant billboard. It looks like it's in New York City. And the billboard says, "People find it odd that we don't name our products. We tried it once, but scientists are terrible copywriters, so we stuck with hyaluronic acid." So like the idea that, we are so bad at creating products, right? Or like because our products are scientist created, they can't name the product something really cool, right? So instead, we're just going to call it what it is, which is hyaluronic acid. And the sort of message here is like, we're a science-backed brand. But this is actually, if you look at this post, and maybe we can show it to you all on YouTube instead of, if you're listening, you won't be able to listen to this, but if you're watching on YouTube, maybe we can show you what this looks like. But it's a very, very beautiful billboard. Very minimalistic. It gets the point across really well. This was done by a genius copywriter. Let's be clear, okay? Because I know what it looks like on the brand side. This is done by genius marketers. So it is anti-marketing, and it gets the point across really well. They have another one that says, "Water is a chemical. Oxygen is a chemical. If we went with chemical free, we couldn't even sell empty bottles," right? Very beautiful, very minimalistic, very, very straight to the point. They said, "Someone said working with celebrities would be good for our brand, but we couldn't find one with a degree in biochemistry," right? So what's the message, right? The message here is like, we're a science-backed beauty brand, and we don't care much for celebrity. We care for the science. So it's getting all the messages across, and it's in a very anti-marketing way. I think it's actually really beautiful, very simplistic. Similar to them, they did, hyaluronic acid. They named their products for what they are. I named my products for what they do. It's very similar, like approach, where it's like, it is what it is. This is a remedy for dark spots, right? They have hyaluronic acid, right? They're very different approach. They're different approaches, but they're similar in the sense that there's no like, they didn't call it like the water drenched serum, and I didn't call it like the I don't know. I don't even know what I would call it. Even tone, I don't know, something like this. So, but anyway, the point is, they do some genius marketing.
They do, and I've actually fallen back in love with this brand. I know they had a nadir a couple years ago, and then they had some moments last year, which I'm very glad of, because part of the, you know what's fun about their products? They're kind of hard to understand. Even from like my level, I'll say my level of training and expertise and the amount of time I put into topical skincare, they'll still throw out a product there where I'm like, oh, I gotta find out what this ingredient does. Like they're digging deep to try to find some of these new brand product launches, and a lot of them are good. Like their cleansers that their cleanser line that they launched last year, very gentle, very nice. Their glucoside foaming cleanser, super gentle, super nice. I use it all the time. I have their toner, their milky toner they just dropped, and I've been using that also as a part of my reparative. Actually, I used it this morning. It's a very staple part of my skincare routine right now, and I'll probably hit empty on that bottle. So I think they do a great job delivering on their products. Their price point has always been good. I love their anti-marketing. That's me to a T. Something gets popular, I hate it immediately. That's just totally to the heart of who I am. You tell me about Napoleon Dynamite's always my like defining moment. You tell me about Napoleon Dynamite, how great it is. I'm sick of it already before I've even seen it. And so I love their approach. So I don't know. I think they've done a good job staying true to who they are. I know I'd like to have been involved with them more, but this is not what they do. And a lot of their product, their funny thing about their sulfate shampoo, and I talked about this before, I hate that shampoo. I was so excited. I like give them a little clap, little pat on the back for their stance on it, because I think that one was even excluded from some retailers because of what it was. But elegantly, I was a miss for me, but I still applaud them for the thought behind it.
You know what's super interesting about their glucoside cleanser, right? So it's decyl glucoside is the ingredient in it. 2017 contact allergen of the year, becoming a popular cleansing agent nowadays, but is actually a very common allergen, decyl glucoside. Kind of like how cocamidopropylbutane is on the rise as a surfactant allergen. Decyl glucoside been a long-term contact allergen. So it's interesting that it's sort of re-emerging. So it should be interesting to see like kind of how things play out with this ingredient.
It's true, but I think this is like a common story again of like preservatives and allergens. It's like rotate one in, rotate one out. And the nice thing, though, I would say about The Ordinary is if you're allergic to one of their products, you're probably going to be able to figure out what it is. Like, it's not a hidden list. It's not a complicated list. So at least you could make a good adjustment and move on if you develop an allergy to something of theirs.
Yep. So look at this. So since 2009, contact dermatitis rates to decyl glucoside has risen from 0.65 to 2.2% in 2016. So 2.26% of people, so 2.2% of people tested for allergens were allergic to decyl glucoside.
Nice.
So yeah, so you know, if you're allergic to it, stop using it. I don't know necessarily that you have to avoid things that you're not like outwardly allergic to. It's just that like if you suddenly notice that this product is irritating you, you kind of know what the culprit could be at that point, especially because The Ordinary doesn't use any fragrances. So like you said, you can kind of point it to an ingredient pretty quickly. But overall, I do love their marketing. I think it's smart. I've always loved their price points. I've noticed that their price points are slowly creeping up since I believe Estee Lauder acquired them. And so it should be interesting to see. I love how Estee Lauder kind of has like their range of products, right? They have like Estee Lauder, like, which is like hundreds of dollars. They have their Clinique, which is like in the 40 mastige range, sometimes a little bit higher. And then they have like the more like real mass products like The Ordinary. All right, so on to the next topic. And you know, I can't even find this article anymore, but it was a really, really well done article. And now it's behind a paywall, unfortunately, but it was part of this, it was part of the Dallas News. Dallas Morning News is like the name of the publication, and it was like a really deep dive on business and retail. Basically, the title of this article was "How Neutrogena Missed Out on the $42 billion Beauty Boom," and it basically kind of chronicles the rise of CeraVe and La Roche-Posay and juxtaposes it against the fall from prominence of Neutrogena. And it's just sort of something really interesting because they basically document this last maybe 5 years or so, which is like this massive skincare boom that occurred during the pandemic and after the pandemic, and how there's been this huge lift in the beauty industry, especially derm-backed beauty brands. You saw the rise of CeraVe, became the number one skincare brand in the United States. La Roche-Posay, the fastest growing skincare brand in the United States, 2 years over. But actually, if you look back 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, Neutrogena was the biggest brand. It was the number one dermatologist recommended skincare brand, and they actually had to drop the title from during this fall from grace, essentially. So, I mean, as somebody who basically lived alongside these brands over the last 4 to 5 years, um, it's been interesting to watch almost as an insider of this, because the writing was on the wall before the statistics were showing what they were showing. Like, we saw it happening in real time. We saw the marketing efforts by CeraVe, La Roche-Posay, the marketing efforts by Neutrogena, and we saw the user perceptions. We saw the virality of the other brands, and we saw like what each leaned into, right? Like, we saw, CeraVe, La Roche-Posay lean more into derms and more into the science, where you saw Neutrogena lean a little bit more commercial. They were doing like hype houses with real world creators. Like, it was like, just sort of different. Like, they leaned into different elements of the brand. And then the outcome is sort of what the outcome is. And then they talk a little bit in this article, which, like I said, is now behind a paywall. But they talked a little bit about how Neutrogena has now shifted their efforts back to doing what they were doing originally. But we saw this because Neutrogena had done a ton of medical detailing in our clinics pre-pandemic. So they were sampling a ton. They had reps coming into the office. They were doing all kinds of stuff to get derms to know about their products, recommend their products, and then that would lead to recommendations to the patients. And then those patients would learn about them, go out to the stores and buy them. Once you become the number one skincare brand, I think a lot of times you feel like you don't need to do those things anymore, right? Like, you're number one. Why? So they cut back on a lot of those efforts. And I saw that happen in real time in our offices. And then CeraVe and La Roche-Posay did a lot of that. And this is not like them paying doctors by any means. This is just coming into the office to tell them about their science, to give samples, not for the doctors to use themselves, but samples like minis that they can give to their patients to use, coupons that they can give to their patients to use. This is what's happening like on the office level. And this is what happened with CeraVe and La Roche-Posay over the last 5 years. They had a single rep that would represent usually both CeraVe and La Roche-Posay, and they would go office to office, educating derms about their products, giving samples, trying to understand why these products are better for the barrier, what the benefits of ceramides are, what the benefits of the studies they've done, even on La Roche-Posay, doing studies on radiation patients, on cancer patients, and how their moisturizers help in these conditions. Like, this stuff is a big lift for derms when they are seeing patients with different types of skin conditions. And this led to an overall lift in the offices. This led to a lift on social media because the derms who were on social media were learning about these products in the office. And I think that was the success. And now I think Neutrogena is trying to get back to their roots. But there's always a lot of friction when you're trying to fight sort of trying to catch like a falling blade. So it'll be interesting to see if they can turn it around and get back to their former glory.
Wow, that's a heck of a metaphor. Catch a falling blade. I have never heard that, but that's an incredible visual. So yes, and I think this is a very interesting. It's been a huge shift, like huge. I mean, just functionally, like from the outside perspective, just watching over the last few years, what are people talking about, and then seeing the numbers now behind it. We talk about this a lot. So whether it's Neutrogena, and then you also have Olay, which I mentioned kind of before here, and then Aveeno, they actually mention also, which is also owned by Kenvue Inc., which owns Neutrogena. They own Aveeno. And we're just seeing their plummet shares. It's not that they have great products, all of those brands I listed, but it's been about tradition. Honestly, a lot of it's traditional advertising versus the new wave of advertising. And then you can perhaps put Clinique into the discussion there. There's a big demographic split with Clinique too. A ton of my patients use it, but we don't see a lot of it. I think there's going to be a shift in that brand line in particular here. I know they're also investing, but a lot of these brands are trying to play catch up in trying to adapt, I guess, to this post-pandemic world, which has really never quite been the same. In so many fronts has never been the same, but in the cosmeceutical advertising front, it's also not going back to the way it was. And again, I think CeraVe and La Roche-Posay have earned it in a sense. Their products, the way you phrased CeraVe to me, the thing that made it it's incredible that it took off like it did, because there's nothing like sexy about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's budget friendly, like good volume. I mean, truly clean skincare, like no allergens, trustable for your generalizable recommendation. Great for sensitive skin. Like this should be your derm favorite. It makes perfect sense. Same with La Roche-Posay. Like I've fallen in love with that brand over the last few years more and more. You look at their moisturizing line, it's like undoubtable as to why. And all of these are just hand in hand dermatologist favorites. Again, your Neutrogena has great products. Love some of their products. Same with Olay. Same with Aveeno. These are amazing brands. But we'll see their future. We'll see what happens with them and what they're able to kind of create in terms of attention on their brands.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of great products. It seems that they're launching so many, and I think that creates a little bit of confusion from anybody. I'll give you an example. It says the spokesman, they talked to a Kenvue spokesperson. So just to kind of give you like an overlay of like what Neutrogena like infrastructure looks like. Neutrogena was owned by Johnson and Johnson. They spun off their consumer division to Kenvue. So Kenvue is like a separate company that has their own stock ticker and everything. And now that Kenvue company oversees both Neutrogena and Aveeno and Neostrata, and there may be one or two more. It's not coming off the top of my head right now, but they have like now their own consumer division. And according to this article, now I finally got it out of the paywall. They've now introduced over 100 new products in the last 5 years. Now, that can be like a little bit confusing. And then they have another quote here. I forget about that. I have to admit, they're not top of mind anymore. They're talking about Neutrogena. A dermatologist in Atlanta said 9 times out of 10, she says, her patients reach for CeraVe or La Roche-Posay. What makes Neutrogena different? She questions. They're a good brand, but I'm not quite sure why. And so now they're, like I said, they're trying to turn it around. They're trying to mimic the playbook. And there was an ex-Neutrogena executive that was interviewed for this article. And they said the clearest sign that this person had that Neutrogena had lost its way was when their daughter, so this former executive of Neutrogena, started buying CeraVe face wash and moisturizer. So daughter of former Neutrogena executive walks in to a store, buys CeraVe face wash and moisturizer. They said that the family had stocked Neutrogena products exclusively in the household, but the 20-year-old wanted the brand that she saw on TikTok. So it really is sort of interesting. And the thing is that I do think that CeraVe, especially CeraVe, has a much clearer brand story, right? That people can sort of understand. They have a much stricter formulation guideline. They don't have hundreds of thousands of products, but very limited scope of what they do. They don't ever use fragrances, like all of these things. Whereas Neutrogena has some products with fragrance, some products without fragrance. They have some products that are really good that a derm would recommend, and they have some products that are quite awful that no derm would recommend, right? So it's not as cohesive of a brand story. But I do think that they have so many core products that are excellent products that there's always an opportunity to turn it around for a brand like Neutrogena, for a brand like Clinique, for a brand like Aveeno. Like Aveeno is like a derm brand, right? Like Aveeno's like eczema line is like a derm eczema line, but you don't see derms talking about it at the cadence that you see them talking about these other brands. And so I do think there's a path towards success for them, but I do think that there needs to be serious marketing efforts, serious like discussions inside on how and what their strategy is going to be going forward. And I know the team well, and I think there is some incredible people on that team that could turn it around. But I think that it needs to be done in a very cohesive fashion, because otherwise those core elements of what makes Neutrogena great are going to get lost. And that would be quite unfortunate because they do have quite a few products that are incredible.
Yeah, I agree. Aveeno and their oats. Like last year was the year of oats. No one really talked about it, didn't get much attention. Everyone came out with an oat balm last year. But Aveeno is like Aveenote. That is the OG oat brand. Yes, Aveeno, you can steal that, but tag me at me.
Aveeno, it comes from Avena sativa. It is literally named for oat. Like the brand was named for oats, and there are other brands that have now become prominent for oats that people don't even realize that Aveeno is the oat brand.
I know it's the OG, and they really should have doubled down. I know they did that this year at the AAD with I think Tomasian. I saw him doing that. I think you did something with them, but like they need to own it, and it possessively. They need to own that space aggressively. They need to own that space. So I hope they do, because Aveeno especially, like, again, has a super clear brand messaging. Like if CeraVe does, Aveeno does equally they just haven't been able to capitalize it, haven't perhaps put the inertia or attention behind getting that done. But anyway, hope them nothing but success because they have tremendous products.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and we've seen it in real time happening, right? So, yeah, I think there's still an opportunity there to turn it around, and I hope they do. But it's always interesting, the skincare industry and overall how it all comes together. But thank you all so much for tuning in. We covered a ton on the podcast today. Would love to hear about some of your favorite sunscreens going into the summer. We're going to be talking a lot about sunscreens every week. Maybe my product of the day every week going forward is going to be a sunscreen, a different sunscreen that I've been loving this week for you to all try out. If Remedy for Dry Lips is back in stock, definitely go check it out. We've been getting a lot of questions about that, and I'm excited to see Dr. Maxfield's new launch coming, hopefully July. We'll see.
Yeah, July will be a big month. Big month, July.
All right. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next time.